related to high tech. It's just a silly contention. High tech lowers costs everywhere across the board, increases productivity, improves everything. Our computer systems are trillions of times faster and tons smaller. Healthcare, if it had been untouched by the federal government, would be readily available to all, abundant, and much, much cheaper, and much better for that matter.
It's interesting in most industries, especially because of technology, there is higher productivity with the introduction of technology, and of course there are fewer people working. Donald Trump gave a speech today at the Boeing factory, and he talked about how all these manufacturing is increasing in New York. Well, it's been increasing for over 20 years. What hasn't been increasing is the number of employees in manufacturing. Manufacturing employment is down substantially while productivity is up, and that's the same throughout the entire country. Now, isn't it interesting that even in the healthcare system, we are introducing technology and employment continues to increase? Why is that?
Yeah, because there's so many malincentives circulating throughout the whole healthcare system that inefficiency is abundant. There's overuse, massive overuse of the system, for one thing. There's no functional price signals anywhere in the system to adequately send the appropriate supply to the appropriate location where the demand is. None of that exists in any way, shape, or form. You can't go to your doctor and find out how much something costs. You can't find out how much something costs at a hospital until you get the bills over the course of 3 or 4 months. So there's no functional free market in the healthcare system. Therefore, everything is inefficient.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that I had open heart surgery about 3 years ago. I think I'm still getting bills. The thing is, I don't understand the bills. I mean, it doesn't say, we cut open his chest and took some parts out and put parts in. It cost so much. I received bills, and they're several pages long. I understand none of it. When I called once to find out if I should even be billed for it, no one could explain it to me. I don't think anyone understands what the bills represented. And some of the procedures were done several months ago. I'm not even certain what procedure they were referring to. Am I alone in this? Am I just so stupid that I cannot interpret this stuff?
You are definitely not alone. I'm a doctor, and I don't know what's coming across when I get a bill. There's a bunch of codes down there that I would have to look up. That there's a whole field of what they call coding professionals who sit in the back offices of facilities and doctor's office to try to orient procedure codes in the right specific sequence to maximize some insurance company or government payout. And when we see these bills at the patient level, we look at them and have no understanding of what all these numbers are or why we're getting charged $350 for what should have been a $25 office visit. Mm-hmm. Yes, you're not alone. Okay. The whole country is totally consumed by this.
I did my own test once, and this is loosey-goosey. I mean, it wasn't scientific at all, but I try to gather, and I had a replacement knee. So I used to be a triathlete and a marathoner, and I ate up my knees really badly. But I wish I could still do that, but I can't. But I had knee replacement surgery several years ago, and I just kept on getting the bills just never stopped. But they were never large. It was like $43.17, things like that, but continually. And so I collected as many papers as I could, added it up, and to determine how much I paid. And then I called a cash-only hospital, which is in Oklahoma City. You go in there, you pay cash on the barrel head, they replace your knee, they throw you out, game over, right? And I asked them how much it would cost me for a knee replacement, and my portion of all these little bills that I paid, the deductibles, if you will, from the was actually more than what if I would have paid cash. Mm-hmm. Now, and that's not scientific, because I'm sure I left stuff out or I put maybe double things in, but it was a pretty good indicator. See how close I got. And I said, geez, if I would have had paid cash, I would have paid less.
Yes, it's an intriguing issue where the insurance costs so much that you end up paying a huge amount for that, plus you get hit with a lot of deductibles. I'm not opposed to deductibles, by the way. I like high deductibles,
right.
But you get hit with them as well as paying that burdensome insurance fee and getting stuck with a bunch of insurance clerks making your decisions for you. You really aren't getting much for your money. And doing something like, checking out Oklahoma Surgical Center and saying that, if I didn't have insurance, I'd have all this money saved up that I could go get Dr. Smith and his crowd to put my new knee in, or go to have a nice trip to Grand Cayman and get it done there at 20%, 30% at most of the cost in the United States.
Oh, yeah. Well, two of my friends, one is a emergency room doctor. He says, all I want to do is doctor. All I want to do is doctor. He says, I let all that stuff, let the hospital worry about that. And the other one is an anesthesiologist. He just does, he's like a contractor. He comes in, he does his job, and he goes home. And I said, these guys are smart. They're playing the system smart. They're not getting stuck with an office with most of the people are just pushing paper and, on a time schedule and being told what to do every time a patient walks in. So those are the two friends that I have, my closest friends that are doctors that I think they made the right decision. Well, now
in the current system, they're employees is what they are.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're employees, and but they don't have to put up with all of the gobbledygook that regular physician puts in. Now, do you know if Donald Trump is going to wind up making this any better, or does he just sound good?
I don't know anything that's going to be happening in the near future. It's very, very hard to predict. Congress has to do something or other because that's what they always have to do. They have to do something. And so Paul Ryan will come up with something. Rand Paul will come up with something. They'll argue it out, go back and forth. When the last major thing that the Republicans did that I recall was make Medicare Part D. So I'm not counting on the Republicans to solve the problems of Obamacare.
Yeah. What should we do? As a nation, what should we do? Because there's a tremendous interest and euphoria almost about the European healthcare system, where healthcare is, sort of a human right, and everyone gets healthcare. And there's an assumption, and I've never studied it, but there's an assumption that everyone has access to healthcare, regardless, and people are a lot healthier there than they are in the United States. And the healthcare system really works. Why can't we do the same here?
Well, we could. The way I think about it is the way for the healthcare system to work is to always have one thing for sure, which is that whoever's making decisions pays the bills. And there's two ways to go about that. You can have a fully socialized system where the government is making the decisions and the government's paying the bills, i.e. the government's making almost all the medical decisions or influencing them a great deal. Or you can have the free market system where you're making the decisions and you're you're paying the bills. And what we have in the United States is where the individual patient's making the decisions, but some third-party government insurance company is paying the bills. And that does nothing other than lead to hyperinflation. The prices go up and up and up, and then the patient has to cede more of its authority to the insurance company in some form or another, because the prices are rising so fast, and the only one rising is the insurance company. So the insurance company starts clamping down on prices as best it can, and that takes away freedom. So we have this that's not a middle ground. We have what I would call a corporatist or fascist healthcare system in the United States now. Obamacare made that mandatory to participate in. So we have fascism, which really sucks. And then the Europeans have the socialist model where the individuals have given up their power to the collective and the politicians.
Yeah. Well,
I would much go for the free way myself, the freedom way, not the free way.
Yeah. Does the European system work? Do you know?
Well, I think it works the same way that all socialism does. It works as long as there's enough people around who's still productive enough to pay for it and who are willing to be serfs and slaves to the politicians and economic system that makes them pay their money. But, someday you run out of other people's money.
Yeah.
It's trickling along and poorly getting along, and it's okay. But as people get more collectivized over there, their brain gets infected with the collectivist virus. They get the notions that things are okay, even when they're not.
Now, you're involved in Liberty Healthcare.
Liberty Health Share, yeah. It's one of the healthcare sharing ministries, one of the bigger ones. And basically what it is a voluntary community, voluntary being a key word there. It is voluntary. But we voluntarily share our financial resources with other people who are in need, who are members of our community. So everybody who's a member contributes each month to other people's needs. And if they are unfortunate enough to have an accident or get ill, the community will come in and help share in their needs as well. Key element, voluntary.
Yeah, I know, but how does that work? What if someone in your community, in this case, has a rare form of cancer or whatever, or in a terrible auto accident, and do they go to doctors that belong to the network, or are they outside the network, or how does that work? And how do you guarantee that there's enough money in the network in order to pay the bills?
Great question. So we don't have doctors that we consider network doctors. Our members can go anywhere that they choose, but they have a moral obligation that they've agreed to find doctors and facilities that are not going to be rapacious in their charges, will not do unnecessary procedures. Our members will not ask to have any unnecessary procedures shared in. So they have that obligation to steward the community's resources before asking for any kind of sharing in their medical expenses. So that's on the one hand. On the other side, as far as the second part of the question was about someone who gets cancer and heart disease that's severe or bad accident, it unfortunately happens. We have, I think, 56 or so thousand families right now, 56,000 families, 130 some odd thousand souls that are in the organization. So we get those cases for sure. We do not guarantee that there will be money because that's not what we do. Our organization shares what members contribute. So there is no guarantee, but we haven't failed at all ever. So yeah. It's we have a good system, and it relies on our members remembering that they're not takers, that they're givers, and that when they are in a bad situation, if they're capable, they need to do their best to make a good deal with the doctor or facility.
Yeah. Now, if a person just goes in for a routine medical checkup, a yearly exam, just to see a blood test and whatever, I assume the people who belong to the network pay that out of their own pocket.
To some extent. So it's actually surprisingly generous the way that our members currently share. One of our programs, the most popular program, has a wellness check included that you make your monthly contributions, and the membership will kick in to help with a wellness check once a year. And that's, kind of consistent with a lot of people's notion that a wellness check is helpful. For some people, it's absolutely not. But then if they're, typical thing, if they go in for an ear infection, the membership doesn't share in that if it's underneath $500 in a year. So right now, the most common program is once you've gone over $500, we call it an annual unshared amount. But it's also, it's kind of the equivalent of a deductible. Once you've gone over that, then the membership is willing to share to reasonable amounts of money for what you go seek. You can't go get luxury care and expect the membership to share in everything, but
right. Yeah. So there's a certain amount that if you just go in for your regular checkup or whatever, and that particular doctor charges you $75 or $125 for a checkup, that comes out of your own pocket.
For a non-well check, yes. For any kind of visits you have with your doctor, it's going to come out of your own pocket up until you've accumulated $500 in expenses for the year.
Okay.
And then it's okay to ask the membership to help.
Yeah. Now, what happens to those people who are on Medicare? I mean, I have no choice. I have to take Medicare because I'm 160 years old, and and I have Medicare. It's not a choice.
Right. Well, there's very few people of Medicare age within the healthcare sharing ministries because they have this Medicare thrown on them. But there's some religious organizations that the members refuse to participate in government programs. and they'll stay on board in our ministry.
Yeah.
And yes, of course, they cost. They have more medical expenses accumulating, but we owe our elders. But the only issue that I have with it is I'm happy to share with older folk, as long as they don't tell me I got to at the point of a gun.
Right. Okay.
And Liberty Health Share is all voluntary.
Well, what if a person smokes versus a person who doesn't smoke? Does one person pay more than the next, or does everyone pay the same amount, or is it voluntary as to how much you put in?
It is voluntary how much you put in, but there's a minimum that gets you eligible to receive sharing, so from other people. So the smokers, they're not in Liberty Health Share. Plain and simple. If you're a chronic drinker or a smoker, or you engage in risky health behaviors that would not effectively help save the overall membership's money, you're not in. So there's no higher fee that you pay. You're just not in.
I see. And
Yeah.
so you have a screening process that ensures that these people are concerned about their health, but you may be able to detect whether or not a person smokes and maybe control those people who do smoke by not being eligible. What about people who consume unhealthy foods, and people who are grossly overweight and are just, heart attacks waiting for it to happen? Is there a way around that, or do you find that your members are generally people who are conscious about their health? That's why they're joining this thing, because they know they're not going to spend a lot on health care. They want to contribute, and they want to pay as little as possible for the best possible care.
Yeah, so we do exclude people who have chosen to have high-risk lifestyles, and we allow people to come in and join as provisional members, where for up to a year, when they're coached to lose weight, to get their hypertension under control, to get their diabetes under control, during which time we'll share in many of their expenses. But if they don't accomplish the motivational task of becoming healthier, then they don't get to stay.
Right.
So there's a lot of personal responsibility that's required of our members to be appropriate members of our organization.
So we're talking about individual responsibility, something that you don't hear about, and neither are you encouraged to have by our illustrious government. I love that. Now, how well is this working, and can it be expanded throughout the United States so people have people actually have an option? Well, I guess with Obamacare, most people have to, if they don't join the system, then they have to pay. Was it $2,500? They have to pay in a fee, I guess a fine, sort of a fine for not joining. Do people pay that fine and also belong to Liberty Healthcare?
No, Liberty Health Share provides an exclusion from the tax/fine of not being involved in the Obamacare insurance fascist process. So you can, by joining Liberty Health Share, you are excluded from having to pay that or exempted. There are several sharing ministries that have that exclusion.
I see.
So it's a motivator, but we want our members not to be joining because of escaping from Obamacare's clutches. We want our members to join because they want to contribute to the development of a system which is much more moral. It's voluntary. It's helping your neighbor the way Americans do, which is voluntarily, not under the point of a gun from some narcissistic politician.
Yeah, what bothers me about all these programs, and of course the affordable health care is takes the cake in the whole thing, is the fact that if you read the Constitution, it is unconstitutional that the government says you must have health care and you're going to pay through the nose for it because we're going to have this gigantic bureaucracy ensuring that you get the health care we think you deserve. I don't think I've seen anything like that in the Constitution. How does something like that ever get past Congress?
Yeah, I think a whole lot of unconstitutional things get past Congress on a weekly basis. So The Constitution, we all love it. All of us in our world love the Constitution, but it has not protected our freedoms from the rapacious government. Yeah. So it wasn't a perfect document. It is not a perfect document. It failed to protect our freedoms. We have to protect our freedoms. Yeah. And the Constitution is a great tool to help us in that. Certainly, there is nothing in the federal authority in our contract that we made to create this United States. There's nothing that gave the federal government the power to do what they're doing with healthcare, to force us to have health insurance. Of course not. Forcing us to have a financial product and pay for a financial product is nowhere in their delineated powers. But I would like to point out, though, I would love to get on this program that insurance or health insurance and health care are two very different concepts that the Democrats for a very long time conflated, and over about 20 years or so managed to make us believe they were synonyms. Health care, health insurance became synonyms. They would use them back and forth in the same line. And really, truly different. Obamacare does not give people health care. Obamacare mandates that they get insurance. And insurance is a financial product, generally for profit, that is not only is it not correlated with health care, it is the antithesis of health care, because health insurance and the third-party payer problem, the moral hazard that comes from other people paying for the decisions that one person makes, is what made the hyperinflation happen in healthcare. We know it's not high tech. It's somewhat, the high prices are somewhat contributed to by the legal and defensive medicine, but overwhelmingly the prices are high because people don't care what they're paying for their health care.
Right.
They care what they're paying for their insurance, but they're not caring what they're paying for their health care. So much not caring that they don't ask for prices. Yeah. I mean, what do you ever buy out there? When do you ever buy anything that you don't ask for the price before you buy it?
Yeah. Well, I know Sally here, she's in my studio right now. She went through an operation, and I demanded that they not give her anesthesia during the operation because I thought it was too expensive. She can scream all she wants, And
much cheaper to scream.
Yeah, it's much cheaper that way.
But hard,
let me give you the way I perceive the programs today under abusive government. Now, when my uncle came over here back in 1930, he belonged to an organization. I don't remember the name. It started with an M, though. It wasn't Monsanto. And he was in how do you call customer service? You know what I mean?
And, I understand.
Anyway, and what I have a difficulty separating is what's the difference between the organization that my uncle belonged to back in the 1930s and 1940s. And our government today?
Oh, that's easy. The government today is a legalized extortion racket. Yeah. That's the difference. It's legal. Yeah. Otherwise, other things pretty much the same.
Yeah, to me it seems the same. I just wanted your opinion on that. I thought maybe I was going to say, boy, you're nuts. There's nothing the same. But I didn't know that, in one case, he would come over and go, you got to do this. If you don't, for me, I tell you, I feel for you because I would never do anything, but I can't help what happens to you, and the ball game was over, and but our government does the same thing, you Absolutely. Don't comply with the rules, the ball game's over. I mean, why don't we call this the United Mafia of America? It's the same thing, and yet we don't look at it that way anymore. They don't have the loyalty. What's that?
They don't have the loyalty that the mafia has.
That's right. But they really had a heart. If they took care of somebody. I don't want to say the words. They took care of somebody, and he had a sick mother. They took care of him. They had a heart. But I don't understand the mentality of America. I'm going to change course a little bit, but a couple of programs ago I talked about. I was channel surfing on television. I saw this stupid zombie movie, and I'm sitting there saying, I don't understand zombies. I really don't understand. They all walk the same way, funny with one leg and the other leg drags, and they don't eat each other, but they eat people who are not zombies. And I'm just trying to understand what is a zombie, and it dawned on me that all those zombie movies, the N Nation and all those movies, are really metaphors for people who don't think. And it dawned on me, and I said, I've been wondering about this for the longest time. It's been staring me right in the face. All these movies are metaphors, just like in that movie Ideology back about 6-7 years ago. They were watering the crops with Gatorade, and all the crops were dying, and they kept on saying, but Gatorade has 11 essential vitamins and minerals, all zombies, and these were all metaphors, and we thought they were sort of funny programs, comedies or whatever, but they really were metaphors, and you can see that today. Yet the government is like the mafia, but yet we don't see it because the government is giving us something, gives us 11 essential vitamins and minerals, and we just repeat what we hear on television. We repeat what we were told in school, and we question nothing. And should you question it, then you're a radical, you're strange, you're somebody we probably should not hang around with, or should associate with. And
like you?
Like you, Sally. Thank you. And Sally drinks Gatorade every day. But I see this today where people cannot see the abusiveness of government through programs like Obamacare or any other one. I don't care, even Social Security, any of it, and how it has destroyed the family, the government programs enable people, and when you enable a person, you drive out their spirit, and you literally kill the person inside, and they have no worth anymore. And we see this, and we repeat it over and over again, but God forbid you take it away, people go nuts, and they don't see this. And I guess I'm seeing this more and more clear as I get older and older, unfortunately, and I don't see us turning it around. I see it getting worse until we get to a point where there is no more and something breaks down. And what happens then, I have no idea. What say you on that?
I agree in all respects. We have been zombified. We have been infected by the collectivist virus. It's a neurologic brain disease transferred by ideas through the internet or through large groups or political mobs, whatever, where we start forgetting individuality, thinking in the mob thinking in the 1984 George Orwellian group think, and become essentially marching morons. That's what's happened to the United States. Fortunately, there's still some America left. You're a part of America. When I'm sitting in a taxi cab in Mumbai with two people talking about freedom, that's America. But I don't think that the United States is the same thing as America anymore. The United States is now just another government protection racket out to channel resources to the politically powerful and where they want to send it. And they're feeding off like parasites off the Americans who are productive and are free. Bit by bit, there's fewer and fewer of those Americans anywhere in the world. And again, I mean Americans, regardless of what language, what nationality, what religion. The Americans are the ones who are focused on freedom and liberty, individual responsibility, what the United States used to protect. But now the United States doesn't protect it anymore, as exemplified by Edward Snowden, who is a traitor to the United States government, but a patriot and a hero to many Americans.
Right.
That should be very telling.
Yes, it is. I used to go to a meeting, and I officially stopped going, in fact, just this week. Once a week, it was a business meeting, and the people there are pretty highly educated. There's one guy, he's a engineer. I mean, there's several people, but there's an attorney there. There's a guy who does financing of companies. So, I mean, they're not, not ignorant. They're in the business world and all that, but they talk like zombies. And I always seem to be the odd guy out. No matter what the subject comes up, it seems that I'm always on a different wavelength than everyone else. And it seems that they became, and these people are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, and it seems that they've been affected. And you think at their age, they would think back and say, we've got a problem, Houston, but they don't. They actually buy into the system now.
It's a disease. It's a disorder. It's contagious. And people, I mean, one of the most critical parts of this contagion is that whatever infects us, this idea of collectivism which infects us, uses as barriers both denial and defensiveness, so that if it gets attacked, if you attack, you raise a concern, find an internal contradiction in some progressive argument, collectivist argument, the defenses will come up. They'll go on the aggressive and they'll call you a Nazi.
Right.
They will, their denial mechanisms will go up, and they'll leave the conversation. Or if they're very civilized, they'll agree to disagree,
right.
which basically just means that they're going to finish the conversation and then go use government to force you to abide by their will.
Right. Now, I'm going to just change the subject a little bit. I was given a book by you guys. Thank you very much, Doug Casey and John Hunt, Speculator. I just started reading the book, so I can't talk to it. But what's the metaphor behind this book? What's the thrust behind this book?
Well, this is what does a healthy human person look like as he navigates his life, his adulthood, and as he undertakes 6 professions. And Speculator is the first of the series of 6, maybe 7 books. And we have a 23-year-old hero who we say is healthy, not because he's fully formed and finished and fully mature and figured everything out. He's not. He's got a lot to learn. He's naive. But what he doesn't do is think it's okay to force everybody to live by what he wants or abide by his will. And that's, if he has a superpower, that's it. He's just not going to force people to abide. He's going to use persuasion instead of force. Speculators is his story of a kid whose mom died when he was young, goes to West Africa to try to learn about gold mining and investment and speculation, and get caught up in a rebellion and a mining fraud. And back home, the IRS is hot on his tail. And so it's a very fast action type of thing with a plot that libertarians love. And hopefully it bit by bit might serve as an inoculation for young people against the collectivist contagion.
Okay.
And that's really maybe the purpose of the whole series, is to prevent some of these infections that happen in all the progressive arts colleges.
Yeah. Well, I'm anxious to get into the meat of the book, so I will do so. Now, let me ask you an unfair question. Where do you see us going? What do you see changing? Do you sense with the new commander-in-chief, if you will, do you see really any substantive changes? Or do you just, the way I see it is maybe different than most people see it. I just see a guy who doesn't know what the heck he's talking about, and he's a populist because what he says sounds good, sounds good runs bad type thing. And I'm not too sure. In fact, I'll be very honest with you. I'm very concerned about our country at this point in time, even considering our new executive chief.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see politicians fixing what politicians break. So, I mean, relying on politicians, I believe, is a mistake. Certainly wouldn't rely on a party. I mean, Republicans and Democrats, it's very interesting to see. The Republican Party under Bush seemed to mostly ignore the Constitution. The Republican Party under Obama was very much vocal about the Constitution. I'm generalizing, and I'm collectivizing the party as a whole, not the individuals. Now we have the liberal Democrats out there saying the word Constitution repeatedly because they're not in power anymore, and they realize that the Constitution may be some defense for them. I wish they'd been respectful of the Constitution for the last 8 years. So I don't see the big problems being done. I see Cohn and Mnuchin in there as the economic advisor, secretary of the Treasury. These are people straight out of Goldman Sachs. I don't see them taking on the number one threat to freedom that I've ever seen, which is the Federal Reserve. I do not see any part, Republican or Democrat, taking on the Federal Reserve. And until you take that on and get rid of it, we can't have a true free market in this country. We can't have freedom. Yeah. So what all the rest is kind of like filtering around the edges, and maybe get a little less regulation on this side and more regulation on that. And I have some optimism as a small business owner that the federal government might get the hell out of my way for a little while, but I'm not counting on it.
With our hellacious national debt, which, if you don't count extraneous, funds to the military, emergency funds to the military, if you don't count off the balance sheet items and the whole host of them, our current debt is only around 20 trillion. We have Professor Kutlakoff on here several times, and he's adamant that we're closer to 1/4 of 1 quadrillion if you include all the unfunded debt. Obviously, this is unsustainable. I remember Ross Perot. Remember Ross Perot back in 1990 was wailing that our national debt was approaching $4 trillion. Jeez, we can do that 1 year now almost. But and he made a campaign against it, and he was right. And here we are sitting at multiples of that, and yet we seem to be less concerned today as we were back then. You think because we have passed all of those thresholds of saying, oh, if it ever reaches 10 trillion or 15 trillion, the ball game's over, and nothing happened, that people really are getting to the point of believing that it really doesn't make any difference, but someday we're going to wake up and we're going to be really surprised.
Yeah. Well, I think you've got it pegged. Are we zombified? Yes, we're zombified. A. B, are we believing the impossible can actually happen and that you can keep inflating bubbles forever and keep printing money forever and not end up being Zimbabwe? Yes, we're being foolish. Is this tulip bulbs in the Netherlands? Yes, this is tulip mania. And the thing I think that we in the libertarian world keep underestimating is the incredible brilliance of the people who run the Federal Reserve. And I do not say that in a positive light. They are brilliant at manipulating not only our psychology, but the economic pulls and triggers to keep this thing afloat, to keep this fiat currency afloat, to be able to counterfeit $4 trillion at a time and keep us believing that the prices aren't going up, therefore we don't have inflation. Yeah. Why cannot we get through people's heads that the prices are not the measure of inflation? We've been beat on that. The Keynesians have beat us in the colleges. Right. Clearly the prices are low in this country they aren't low in the stock market, but they're low for goods at Walmart because the Chinese are very productive. That's why the prices are low. Think how wealthy we would all be if the Federal Reserve hadn't demolished the value of the U.S. currency over its 100 years existence. We would all be very wealthy people, and we'd have capital galore. The capital's been taken from us through inflation. The underlying defects that are caused by the Federal Reserve and fiat currency trickle throughout everything, the healthcare system, every industry that we have, and take away our freedom. So they're not going to fix that in the government because the government's $20 trillion in debt, and the only way they're going to get out of that is with inflation.
All right, good doctor. Write our listeners right now a prescription. What should they do?
Ignore the federal government and repeat 4 times a day, refill times 12.
How's that? I'm sorry, I missed that. Repeat.
So typical prescription, how many times a day you're going to take the pill? So I'd say ignore the federal government, do that 4 times a day.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Daily for 1 month, refill times 12.
Okay. Okay.
We got to find our way without them because they are the parasites. They don't want us to live without them. We have to get rid of them. We have to evacuate them from our intestines.
Yeah. Well, give us your projection. What do you suspect how things are going to unfold in the next year or two? Do you have any speculation on that?
Speculator. I'll take a speculation.
Yes. Why don't you be a speculator like your book here?
What I think will happen is different than what I will hope will happen. So I hope that the brilliant sociopaths of the Federal Reserve manage to keep this game going long enough that my entrepreneurial endeavors don't get hammered by the collapse of bubbles. But I think it's very possible that the tipping point will be reached. I always think it's possible the tipping point will be reached. It keeps getting pushed off and pushed off,
Right.
but it's got to come back. I mean, we have a bankrupt United States government that somehow is the most powerful entity on the planet, despite being bankrupt.
Right.
And the only way that's the case is through counterfeiting of the currency, and that always comes to an end. So it's just a matter of when. And I think it's where we used to get counsel to have 10% of our assets in gold. I would stick a lot more now, because I think we're just higher risk. We have a higher risk time. Gold, ammunition, silver, the very tradable goods that you want to have, because risk is so much higher. But I hope they keep it going, and that we find our way to let the free market win without letting the government parasitize off the free market.
Right.
And that's the key, is right now the free market gets parasitized by the government.
So there's a chance that President Trump will not make America great again.
I think, the answer is yeah, there's a good chance, because he's one dude. And America has to make itself great again. And the first part of that is throwing off the yoke of those who've been parasitizing off of us.
Right. Well, Doc, thank you so much for being on Liberty Talk Radio. I truly enjoyed it. You're a great guest. I wish you would accept our invitation to return at a later date, and we'll go back and forth once again, if you don't mind.
I would love to.
Okay.
That would be great fun.
All right. So let me give you the last 30 seconds or a minute if you want to wrap things up, or tell our audience about your organization, about your book, or however you want to close it out.
Sure. I think, Speculator, I'd love it if you take a look at Speculator. Doug and I worked hard on it. We're working hard on book 2, which is where our hero becomes a drug lord. And he's always on the moral high ground. So as a drug lord, he pushes a drug that has a strange thing. It's a drug that when you take it, you can't lie to yourself. And can you imagine what governments, organized religions, any organization out there that requires you to lie to yourself to maintain their power over you? What would happen when there's a drug that teaches you not to lie to yourself?
Yeah, that's interesting.
He has to take that underground, right?
Yeah.
So, but if you Speculator, I would ask it, if you get Speculator, you enjoy it, send it to the young people, because that's where we would love to target and help inoculate them. Liberty Health Share, take a look at it. If you think you're right for it, come on board. We'd love to have you.
Oh, so there's no geographic boundaries or anything. It can be anywhere in the United States, I guess, right?
I think it's anywhere in the world, but it's
okay.
Mostly the United States, because it has to be in English, and we transact in U.S. dollars until I can convince the organization to do it in Bitcoin.
All right. One question about Liberty. What if you're on Medicare and Medicaid or whatever the case may be? Can you still join, and does it help in any way, shape, or form? Or would that be
sure, you can join. I think that if you're on Medicaid, it's good because you're contributing. It means you got to take your money and contribute the same as much as everybody else does to the needs of other people. And that's probably a good thing to do, to get into the mindset of voluntarily contributing instead of being extorted.
Right.
But we don't have very many Medicaid folk. Medicare also is the same thing. You've been extorted from your money for a very long time by that system. So it's not a lot of advantages, but there's some. And if you are one of those people who refuses to be part of the government program and use the religion to exempt yourself, then there's plenty of room for you at Liberty Health Share.
Great. I'll take a look at it. Thank you so much. Dr. Hunt, thank you so much for being on our program. Appreciate it very much.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, thank you. Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.
Talk Radio.